This is Chapter 8, Section 8.0, and this is an extra section dealing with naming triangles and Pythagoras. So the learning target is to correctly name triangles, their sides and their angles, and to use Pythagoras. Some things to know are labeling angles in their sides, that all angles in any triangle always add up to 180 degrees. If you're using the Pythagoras formula, a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, then c is always the hypotenuse. And you always label triangles from a target angle. So first we have a few definitions. First, we have a right triangle, and that has an angle of 90 degrees in it. So for example, here is a right triangle with a 90-degree angle inside. Next, we have an equilateral triangle. And in an equilateral triangle, all three sides are equal, and all three angles are also equal. Okay, so the sides and the angles are all the same. So if you have a little line through it, that's an indication that those are the same length. And if all the sides are the same, then all the angles are going to be the same as well. Next, we have an isosceles triangle. And in isosceles triangles, just two of the sides are equal. And the two angles opposite those equal sides are equal. So for example, let's say you have a triangle like this. So those two sides are equal. And then if you follow across, so here's a side, this is the angle that's opposite that side. So this angle, and then here's the other side. This is the angle that's opposite that side. So this angle are the same. So those two things are equal. And then finally we have a scalene triangle. And in a scalene triangle, all three sides are different. And all three angles are different. So those are our four types of triangles. Next, we're going to look at labeling triangles and labeling the angles and the triangles. So there's a couple different ways to do this. So you can either do it using lowercase variable or using the two endpoints. So here we have two identical triangles with the points labeled as capital A, capital B, capital C. So far these are identical. So first we're going to use method 1 where we use a lowercase variable. So here we're going to look at angle A, so this capital letter A at this point here. We're going to trace across and find this side. And we're going to call this side lowercase a. Next, we're going to look at this angle, and we're going to go across, and we're going to call this side here lowercase b. Finally here, we're going to take this last angle, and we're going to go across, and we're going to call this side lowercase c. Okay? So the angle here is the capital, and across is the lowercase letter. The other method is using the two endpoints to label the sides. So let's start here. So here our endpoint is A on one end of this line, and the other endpoint is C at the other end of the line. So in this case, we're going to use capital letters still. So we call this side capital AC. Next one, we're starting with a capital A, and we're ending with a capital B. So in the side here, we're going to call this AB. And then last one, capital B on one side, capital C on the other side. So we'll call this one BC. Okay. Now, it doesn't matter if you call it AB or if you call it BA. No, it does not matter. It can go in either direction. However, the convention is normally that you list them in alphabetical order. So the one that would be at the beginning of the alphabet first, but you can do it, you could call this BA, it doesn't matter. Okay, so those are the two different ways, the two different methods of labeling sides. The next thing is Pythagoras. So Pythagoras allows us, this is something you learned in grade 9, and it allows us to find missing sides. Okay, so if we have the length of two sides, here we have 10 and 15, it allows us to find the third. This only works for right triangles, so that means there must be a 90 degrees somewhere in the triangle. So 90 degrees usually shown by a little square like this. You can also have it written as a 90, or you could just eyeball that it looks like it's 90 degrees. Okay, but you need a right triangle, so there must be at least 190 degrees. These letters here is to show a formula. A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. It doesn't matter if your triangle is not labeled ABC, okay? These are just stand-in letters. The only thing that's important here is the C squared, whatever's alone by itself on the right-hand side, has to be your hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse is the longest side, and you can also find it because it's always across from the right angle. So to find your hypotenuse, you find your right angle, and you go across, and that's your hypotenuse. So let's do that here. Here's our right angle. We're going to go across, and this is our hypotenuse. Okay, that's always how I find our hypotenuse. And the hypotenuse must be the C. For the A and the B, they're going to be the other two sides, and it doesn't matter which is which of the other two sides. Okay, you can call this side A and this B, or this B and this A, it doesn't matter. The only one that's really important is the hypotenuse. It has to be the C. So we're going to write hypotenuse there. Okay, so let's use our formula. Name and find the missing sides to the nearest tenth. Okay, so first this is asking us to name the sides. So that means it wants us to label them. So we have our two options here. We can label using our lowercase letters, or we can label using our two endpoints. So in this case, I'm going to label using our lowercase letters. So here's our K. So this side is going to be called little k. Here's our L. So this side is going to be called little l. And here's our J. So this side over here is going to be little j. So now we've named them. Next, they want us to find the missing side. So we have our formula. A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. We know that our C squared has to be our hypotenuse. So we're going to take whatever value we have for the hypotenuse, and we're going to fill that in first. So we know it's 15, and our formula has a little 2, so we're going to put the 2 on it, 15 squared. Next, it doesn't matter which one of these we call A. So let's just call this one A. So we're going to call this 10 squared. And then we don't have a value here. There's no information. So we're just going to leave this as B squared. Okay. Next thing we want to do is we want to multiply these out so that we get rid of the squared. So you're going to put 10 squared into your calculator, you get 100. And you put 15 squared into your calculator, you get 225. Now we want to be solving for this B. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the 100 and we're going to move it to the other side. So to move it to the other side, we need to subtract 100 from both sides. So we get B squared is equal to 125. The next thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this squared. So the opposite of squared is square root. So we're going to square root both sides. When we do that, we get B is equal to, and when we do the square root of 125, we're going to get a decimal. It's not going to be a perfect number. But up here it says to the nearest tenth. They want us to round to the nearest tenth. So that means they want one decimal place. So we're going to round to one decimal place. So we're going to get 11.2 when you round to one decimal place. And then we're going to add up here this side. This j is 11.2. That's what we found out. Rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay. So that's, and I'll just write it, j is equal to 11.2. And that's our final answer. So that's how you use your Pythagoras to find missing side. So let's do one more example. So we're going to start off here. We circle our side, draw an arrow, and call this our hypotenuse. Then we're going to do our labeling. So here's our V. We're going to go down. That'll be little v. Whoops. Here's a u. This hypotenuse is going to be little u. And the last one is going to be little t. Now here, if you notice, it says a line and then the number 7. Okay? What that means is that wherever you find another line, it's also the same length. Okay? Lines through here mean identical. So this side is 7. So we know 2 of our sides, and we're looking to try and find the hypotenuse in this case. So we're going to write out our formula. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. We know that c squared is our hypotenuse, and we know that we don't know what our hypotenuse is. So we're just going to leave that as c squared. Here we have 7. Let's call this one a, and we have 7. We can call that one b. So 7 squared plus 7 squared. So we're going to put 7 squared into a calculator. We get 49 plus 49 is equal to c squared. Add up those 49s together. 98 is equal to c squared. And then I don't want it to be squared. So I'm going to do the opposite of square, which is square root. I'll square root both sides. And then I'm going to find out what that is. Again, rounded to the nearest tenth. So we get 9.9 is equal to C. And then we're going to look at what that side's called. So we're looking at doing our hypotenuse side. It's called U. So we're going to say U is equal to 9.9. And oops, all right, I'll change it to red since you opened. And that's our final answer. So for this section, you're going to be doing the worksheet that's directly next in the notes. Just some pointers on this worksheet. I'll do one for you so that you can see what you have to do. So here it says, state if it's a right triangle or not a right triangle. So we're going to look at the triangle and we're going to see, are any of these angles 90 degrees? In this case, no, there's no 90 degrees. So at A, down over here, we're going to write not right. Okay. Next it says, state if it's equilateral, isosceles, or scalene. So equilateral, remember, means all 3 identical sides. Isosceles means 2 sides are identical. Scalene means none of the sides are identical. So this one's short, this one is pretty long, and this one is very long. None of these sides look like they're identical. So we are going to write that it is scalene. Next, it says label the sides using lowercase letters. So I'm going to find each of my points here, and I'm going to go across. I'm going to label using lowercase letters. A, across, B, across, C. Then I'm going to use another color, pink. It says label the sides using their endpoints. So this could also be called, this one here could be called BC. This one here could be called AB. Could also call it BA, but I'm just putting them in alphabetical order. And then this one could be called AC. Okay. So that is what you should do for all of the questions on this page. So you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of those. Okay. And then next section is using Pythagoras. So here you're solving for one side. So sometimes that side is going to be your hypotenuse. You always do this as a first step, find your hypotenuse. So in this case, this is going to be your hypotenuse. So you're solving for either A or B. You can call it what you want. In this one, the hypotenuse is the unknown. So you have an A and a B, and you're solving for your C. So you're going to find the hypotenuse for those questions. Okay, up to G. And then that's it for this first section.